Oh, happy Monday, everyone. Welcome to my show where it really is okay to not be okay. I'm Rae Bonney, qualified counsellor, workplace mental health specialist, not to mention a very dedicated and oftentimes enthusiastically disruptive men's issues advocate. It's rare, but I do dare. But as always, I'm unwrapping one of the greatest gifts going around, and that is people. Layer by layer, we explore the thoughts, experiences, achievements and challenges of ordinary people bound to inspire the best you. At the same time, acknowledging that it really is okay to not be okay. So turn up your radio. The 22nd of January would almost make it Australia Day as well, or whatever people are calling it or not calling it these days. But my guest today is Sean Nichols. Now, Sean is someone who I met recently and until very recently struggled with his health and fitness. From the age of 15 when he went on his first diet, he always struggled with the weight and undiagnosed anxiety problems. He finally, with the help of some very good people, did make a breakthrough 28 years later and is now a transformed man, an advocate for men's health and working to share his experience with others so they can make the breakthrough too. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you for having me on the show.
I might as well even turn your microphone on at the same time. What about that?
Well, that make it much better for the listeners. Thanks for having me on the show, Ray. Really honoured to be on the show talking to you about some of these men's health issues.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Now, we've not known each other for long. In fact, we've only seen each other once. And a lot of people hear about the activities that I get up to around men's issues advocacy. And one of those things last year was the ball that we had called I'm Just a Man. And that was in November. I think it was the 22nd of November.
Yeah, late November.
It was. And we had it on the date which was the anniversary of Michael Hutchins' death, and really brought to light a whole array of men's issues that we're not talking about, and you're actually sitting at my table. How did you get to be one of the guests of honour?
Yes, I was sitting at your table, and it was a pleasure to meet you. I'd recently met Jim Skivalidis, who was the founder of the event, and heard Jim's story, and actually interviewed Jim on my podcast, The Transformed Man Show, and really connected with Jim and really wanted to get behind his event and his cause. And just jumped on board.
Yeah, it was an amazing event. 11 weeks we had to pull it together. The committee we pulled together also was a group of strangers, and testament to what people can do when they really put their mind to it and really care about an issue. So yeah, it took us 11 weeks, but we got 160 people there to the park at Albert Park and had a fabulous night. I was so incredibly proud. And also meeting people like you, and over the sound of we had a band, a couple of bands actually, and one was an In Excess tribute band, and through the cacophony of people's shouting and dancing and laughter, we managed to connect. And I said, "Oh, what brings you here?" And you just handed me your card, which was the transformed man, and then you showed me a photo, a before and after shot, and went, wow, that is true transformation.
Yes, it's something that I still, when I look at those photos, the before photos, I still am amazed that I was that size. And the reason that I use the term transformed man is when I compare that before and after, I am truly transformed from the inside out. Emotionally, spiritually, and then that's manifested physically, which is, something that I, beyond what my dreams were or desires were to get this fit, this healthy.
But you didn't even know that before that light bulb moment, did you?
No, I didn't. I didn't know what health and fitness was. I didn't know what true health and fitness was. I was always sporty. I was always big, like a big fella. People always greet me as a big fella.
Yeah.
And even my family, would say, "Oh, he's big boned."
Big bones that move a lot.
Yeah, big bones, which is a myth because I actually found out I only have 3.9 kilograms worth of bones.
Is that right?
Yeah,
because you are actually a tall man.
Yeah, I'm over 6 foot. So, and that is one of the things that many guys, I think, and I wasn't aware of, is that we carry a lot on our big frame. And for me, it was always carrying that, but I carried a lot internally, and that's where the anxiety, which I didn't know was something I was suffering. It was just manifesting itself in me dealing with it by eating and enjoying food.
Yes.
I enjoyed food. I always enjoyed food as a kid. There was no issues around eating. There was no bias towards eating or not eating or dieting as a child. It was just there was a lot of food and it was enjoyable, and we had a good family life, and that revolved a lot around food. And I believe that when I was stressed and when I was anxious and trying to deal with that, I went back to that joy of food to fill that void of anxiety that I was experiencing.
And culturally, it's so acceptable, isn't it? Food, everyone likes, Australia, we celebrate with food and alcohol, which are two of the biggest killers. But, you also described to me your parents who came from a background that they weren't so fortunate. So when they found fortune, they also used food as a way of expressing, the plentiful stuff they could provide for their children. So you said, you'd open up the fridge and it was like, whoa, always fully stocked. And that's the thing that makes you feel great.
Definitely. We had such good times around the dinner table. We had.
I thought you were going to say around the fridge.
Around the fridge. I had personal good times around the fridge, but as a family, we had such good times around the dinner table. There's always be the Sunday roast, and that would be all the family over, a table full of food, and just eating and enjoying. And the magical fridge,
yes,
and pantry that keeps refilling with all the wonderful treats. That was something really enjoyable as a kid. And like you said, my parents, many people my age, their parents, they came post-war. They grew up post-war in Australia, and so they came out of a time where they weren't affluent, and then they found their fortune. And part of that was, giving their children what they didn't have,
yes,
which was food and plenty of food.
All the rations must have been horrific.
I still remember stories of my parents and my grandparents. And my grandparents, I remember them still eating it, bread and dripping.
Dripping, yes.
And I just watched them as a child. I watched my grandparents eating bread and dripping, and I just couldn't stomach it because I was fortunate enough to have all this wonderful food in front of me.
It was the leftover dripping as well, though, wasn't it? Oh, I remember watching my mum get half a tub of dripping and putting it on a leg of lamb, and that was just normal. But now I think, wow, there's so much fat in a piece of lamb anyway.
I think it's coming back with the trend of ketogenic diets and fat's good.
Yes.
It's coming back in some way, but I don't know whether it's. I think it's probably a better fat now than the lard off the stove. Yeah,
we're going back to culture and even stereotyping. Men, it's okay for men to be big, and it's expected that men will be big, and men eat a lot. If it's Sean's coming to dinner, give him a big serve, and and beer. Men drink beer as well at the pub. They don't drink gin and tonic and a cucumber sandwich. So do you think that still plays a role, Sean, in men's body image and shape?
Yeah, it does. I think the concept that men should be strong and take on everything and deal with it is often then expressed in a way where they turn to food or alcohol to overcome that anxiety of dealing with that, rather than opening up and say, "Hey, I don't want to deal with this," as a sign of weakness. I think still our society hasn't truly opened up to allow men just to be vulnerable and show their strengths and their weaknesses equally.
I can't tell you how many times on this show, because I do have a lot of men on the show, talk about vulnerability, and not vulnerability equaling weakness, because again, that's how we address vulnerability. It's weak, get strong, get resilient, don't be vulnerable. But it's such a beautiful, strong thing, isn't it?
It is. It's one of the things that has really been part of my transformation is facing up to that truth that not everything's going to be perfect, not everything's going to be ideal. There's going to be hard conversations that you're going to have. There's going to be truths that are going to have to.
What's a hard conversation?
Just in terms of something that you feel may be, you may feel that it's needed to be said, but it may initially hurt someone's feelings or raise emotions that may cause conflict or may cause some sort of pain.
So is that about you or about them?
Definitely about me.
Yeah.
Definitely about me, and it's something that I'm sort of still working through. But it's been one of the major things in terms of changing that around.
So how would discussing something about yourself hurt another person?
Discussing something about myself would be more about it's more about my insecurities. Talking the truth to somebody else and letting them know my opinions, again, it comes back to my insecurity of, they won't like me, they won't accept me if I have a hard conversation with them.
Okay, well, give me an example. Go on.
Well, it may be something around, like in a relationship where you've got a partner and they're all excited about something that they want to do or build or buy a new house or buy a new car. And if you're in a position where you think, hey, it's not right, it's gonna hurt us in the long run financially, then that's the thing you've got to say, not pleasing them by saying, yeah, let's do it, and then dealing with the stress of having to find the money.
So was that part of the you before the transformation?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I in understanding myself, I saw that I spent a lot of time and searched for a lot of my happiness through making others happy.
A people pleaser.
It was a people pleaser.
Well, it's another way of like consuming something that feels good, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's not necessarily good for you, but it's a quick fix.
It is a quick fix.
And it works for the moment.
It does. And it took me a long time to realise that that wasn't sustainable.
And also, do you think, if you're talking about conversations that we're having that to please people, what about the media as well, in terms of how, especially talking about men's issues and relationship to food and consumption? Do you look at that sort of stuff as well?
I do look at it, and a lot of the things that I've sort of looked at, and from my experience, is looking at the media's and the food business and the diet industry's obsession with quick fix results.
Yes. But do you think they're also geared to women as well?
Oh, definitely. There's a bigger industry around women's image and weight loss.
Because it's less acceptable for women to be overweight or unfit, where it's okay for men. And then when you look at the media, it is more heavily geared to women and women's outcomes or women's solutions. Whereas men and women biologically are so different in terms of how that works as well. So
yeah, definitely. And the thing with guys, it's often tied to changing their physical appearance, and so there's a lot of men's media on getting fit and healthy is around exercise. And
hard exercise. Every vision that you have of a guy's got a barbell with 1,000 million kilos on it. and or running.
Yeah, and again, I think it's that stereotype of men being the warrior, men being the soldier, men being the heroes. That heroic form that you have to build and have. And what I explain to people and what I found is the exercise and that hard workout exercise is the last thing that comes in the process. The first is the mind and the spirit, and then the food and the nutrition and nourishing your body, and then you have the ability to exercise and build a healthy body.
Because there's a lot of acceptance involved in what you just described then as well, isn't there?
Acceptance in
change needs to happen, or maybe letting go of some habits or things that keep you safe. And it's like riding down the hill and taking your hands off the handlebars. It's so scary, but it has to happen.
It does, and I understand what you're saying. The thing that really needs to come first, even before changing the mind or making any change, is awareness. awareness of what your actual reality is, not the reality, the subjective reality, the stories that you're telling or the stories that other people are telling you, about awareness of what's actually happening in your life, in your mind, with your spirit, and then what's happening physically. You know, and that the learning that I've done over the past 5 years in all those areas has been just profound in terms of making the change and transforming.
And generally, if it doesn't feel good, it's not good for you. And you're right, choosing the right thing. I've recently signed up at F45, and I had Mike Addison on my show last week. He's the owner of our Blackburn studio here, and you know, for me, it's a great program because it suits me, it suits my lifestyle, it suits who I am, how I approach things. Whereas I had a chat last year with somebody who was telling me about his transformation that he was embarking upon, and he'd been on a cruise and met this guy who was a body transformation expert, and he said he could only be described as this massive god. He was 6'6", had muscles behind his eyelids, like he was just so buff, but he had this no sugar diet. It was all about deprivation. He said, I'm going to do it, I'm going to become that guy. And I think it was that afternoon I saw him eating a donut or something. I said, how's that no sugar diet going? He goes, I don't know about it. I don't really know about that. It's not you, mate. It's just not you.
No, and that's a really good point. You really have to find out what works for you. It is a real individual journey. You can call on people and get help from others, but it's really
Oh, there you go. Have a cough. I do have a cough button here. You know, don't know how to use it, but
it really is an individual journey that you have to go on, and any transformation will happen from the inside out.
Or but I beg to differ on that sometimes, because sometimes people start with that feeling of physical exertion and go, "That actually feels good. It's not as scary as I thought," and that can be the start as well, can't it?
It can. You can have interventions. You can have triggers that start you along, but you have to internally accept that change happening. So that physical activity, like the F45, you have to get through those first few days of pain and exertion, and accept that this is the hill I'm climbing now. And the first part of the hill is going to be a struggle. Yes. But it's worth getting to the top.
And that can be mental as well. And that's why I brought that up, because when you were just saying that, I was brought into my mind a very good friend of mine, Bruce. He's the Angry Butcher out in Sunbury. If anyone's listening from Sunbury, he owns the Angry Butcher a cycling shop. And Bruce, a few years ago, had experienced the loss of his wife through cancer and became very depressed and suicidal. And a mate of his, who's a cyclist, was encouraging him to go cycling, and he wouldn't. He was in the pits of depression for very good reason. And it took a while, but then one day he accepted the invitation and he hopped on a bike, and that was it. The next day, I think it was the next week, he bought the shop. He didn't just buy the bike, he bought the whole shop. And many years later, he's now contributing to men in a similar situation who aren't literally travelling so well, but using cycling and moving forward as a medium for getting better.
And it's a great story, and it's a great thing. And even my journey, it wasn't something that I was planning on. I happened to find myself in a position in life where I had to make a choice. And it was that slap in the face that life gave me that put me in a position, a space, where I had to examine some things and look at where my journey was going to go. Was it going to go downhill, or was it at least going to try and stay stable for a little while?
A bit of hunters and collectors there. Do you see what I see? Rae Bonney and Sean Nicholas, the transformed man in more ways than you could imagine. Now, you've picked the set list in terms of songs today, Sean. Hunters and collectors, you can't go past them. But what does that song mean to you?
Well, growing up around late teenage years, having hunters collectors playing all the pubs in Melbourne, it was just a staple. And so I had to put in one of their songs. For me, Do You See What I See is more about a transition and a growing up in the suburbs, but more about seeing life as an individual and asking the question. And at the time, you don't read these things into the songs. You're just banging your head along. But when you go back and you look at them and why you connect with them, it was about my seeking to see, do other people see the world how I see it?
I think you'll often find they don't.
No, I know now that they don't.
Yes. In fact, I talk a lot about your different lenses, and as soon as you get that metaphor of lens and you take yours away and put somebody else's on, it's a very interesting exercise.
Yeah, and that's been part of the journey for me recently is really understanding and exploring that and accepting that no one sees the world how I see it. And it gives you a lot of empathy for, if you understand that for yourself, it gives you a lot of empathy for looking at other people and thinking that how are they seeing the world?
Yes.
How are they seeing the situation? And asking more questions.
And resisting from that temptation to say you need to, you should, you have to, based on my belief system and what works for me. I think that's, if anyone can take anything away today, do take that. Stop it.
Definitely. And that's when, if you're coaching or you're working with somebody, you may be sitting in the same room, in the same space and time, but you'll be having two separate experiences.
Yes. And
what you're saying to that person, they may be hearing a completely different thing, and especially true in relationships.
Interpretation, he says, she says. There's been many movies and TV programs made about that one. It's amazing though, isn't it? But my question is always, what does it feel like being you today?
Definitely. I love that question when you put it to me on the night of the Just a Man function.
Yes.
It's something that sticks with you, and I thought, what is it like being me
today? Because tomorrow could be different.
Yeah, and today, and I often refer to that when we talk about having days when you're not so good, and asking that question and saying, yeah, that's okay. This is just the bottom of the wave, and tomorrow I could be on the crest of the wave. And flowing through that.
Or you could even be further under.
You could be. Or the wave's about to dump on you and you're about to eat sand. So it's about staying in the moment and being okay with how you are in that moment.
But also the people that, maybe helping in the helping industry like we are, it's very easy just to project what you know onto a person and say, well, there's the solution, because quite often people are coming to you to say, well, you've transformed, I want to be like you, how do I do that? And it's not possible to be able to relate that, rather than, well, what does it feel like being you right now, and we'll work with that.
And that's that's a great learning experience to understand that when you are helping people. And when I first started out helping people, when they came and sought my help and I started helping them, I would just prescribe to them exactly what I did.
Yes.
And they would do it okay for about 6 weeks, and then they would just fall back to their old habits. And I couldn't understand it. I said, this works. This works. Just do it.
But what we know about you already, you said before you started your first diet at 15, and like we don't subscribe that much to diets these days, but rather nourishment that you talk about. Then you had your early undiagnosed anxiety, which was coupled with that. And, you said that you always struggled with stress. You were a happy big guy, life of the party, he's the big guy. But at 42, if we fast forward a bit, you were in a long-term marriage and you were working hard you in your own business. Tell us what happened from there.
It basically all fell apart. My marriage fell apart. The business, which was causing a lot of stress, wasn't making the money or had the expectations, wasn't performing how we expected it to perform. And basically it was just ended up in a big train wreck.
Why?
And I think because I was, when I look back on it, I was what I call deluded.
About what?
About my reality. I wasn't aware. I wasn't conscious and in the moment. I was overly positive.
But can you broaden that out a bit? Like when you say you weren't in the moment or you weren't responding.
Okay, yeah.
Was that the larger environment or your small world?
Combination. I lived 2 years ahead of myself. So I projected my future with positivity and optimism and would always say, no, it's going to be all right tomorrow.
So did you include your family in that?
Yeah, everything, my whole life. It was like whatever was going on, I would say.
No, but were they included in that?
No, that's
where I'm trying to get at, yeah.
No, that was the issue. No, I didn't include anybody, Ray. I didn't
Yes.
include anybody. This was all going on in my head. And that was part of the problem, is that I didn't even seek help. I didn't tell anyone my problems. I just tried to deal with it all myself. And that's when the life slapped me in the face and said, guess what? This is bigger than you.
Yes.
And you need to wake up.
So that's when your wife decided that she couldn't be there anymore as well?
Yeah, everything. And so I got out of the business. I got got out of the marriage, and I was just left alone, broke, and in a 135 kilo body with a long list of chronic health issues.
What were some of the health issues that you had?
I had irritable bowel syndrome. I was tired all the time. Some days I just didn't want to get out of bed, so a mild sort of depressive state. I had back pain. I had shoulder pain. I had knee pain. I had hip pain. My mum had just been diagnosed with diabetes, and when I was standing there and had no money, I was in this rundown granny flat in the back of Noble Park. My son calls it the Punisher's safe house in the ghetto.
Probably not as funny at the time.
No, it wasn't. You know, it wasn't funny at the time, but that was the reality. And I was looking at myself, and all I could see was 10 years of life left in me, with all these chronic health issues. And that was the turning point. That was the thing where I thought, one, this isn't how life I expected to turn out when I was young and enthusiastic, but this is life. And what's that next 10 years going to be like? And the thoughts that ran through my head was that it wasn't going to be good. Like, I was thinking of hospital, and I was thinking of medication, and I was thinking of trips to the doctors, and you know, when you start sort of examining the where those health issues were going, it wasn't a pretty sight. It was downhill. And having the thought of what's that going to be like for my children to see, and how am I going to be around to even watch them grow up, you know, because at the time I wasn't seeing much of them, but I still wanted to see their life. And so at that point in time, I decided I just had to put the brakes on. I had to stop whatever I was doing and search for understanding, to find out why I had turned out like this, why when looking back I'd had great successes, but I'd also had great failures. And what I couldn't understand at that time was, how could that all be me? How could it be me having these great successes in work and life and friends and so forth, and how could it be me having these great defeats and failures all in the one person? Yes. and I just couldn't understand it. So that started me on the journey of discovery of asking why. And that's all. I didn't know what the question, any other questions. I didn't even know where I was going to get the answers. I just started searching. I went to the local libraries. I didn't have money even to pay for a psychologist or a coach or anyone. So I just went to the local libraries, and I went from the 050 section to 200, spirituality, religion, psychology, and just went through every book to find one in that vault of wisdom that is a library. Surely there was someone in there that had had an experience similar to mine and could provide me some wisdom.
What did you find there?
I found wisdom.
So 0 to
050. So
Yes.
so before that's some computer books and
Yes.
for the geeks, up to 200. So you've got all the
you
sections.
read everything.
No. I scanned what I did. I spent hours in the library, and I looked at the covers first.
Mm.
You know, you can have happiness, break through pain, all the spirituality. You know, find your spirit, cleanse your chakras, everything. I'd go through and I'd look at the covers and try and find something that would resonate with me. I'd then pull it off the shelf and I'd walk away with a stack of 10 books, and then I'd read the blurbs and read the contents, and just all I was looking for was something to resonate with me. I just had put it out there, just something resonate with me, something connect. And I found a few books, but one really gave me some understanding and gave me hope that I could change, and it was called The Enneagram.
Mm.
And the Enneagram is a psychological profile testing protocol. And being in corporate, I'd done psychological testing and profiling. I thought, here's another one. All I've got is time, so I might as well do the test. Yeah, Myers-Briggs and all that. And what I found with all those is they put you into a box and say, this is your personality. And I never understood it, because I'd look at the other personalities that other people were in other boxes, and I said, but I've got a bit of that one as well.
Yeah, I want to be that one.
And so it never sat in my mind of why I was just in one box. So the Enneagram goes through, it has a number of different profiles, but what it did is it said, this is your dominant profile, but you could, at a low performing level, you act and behave like this. So when you're giving into your fears and you're giving into pain and so forth, you act in a certain way. At your high-performing, high-functioning level, you're acting in another way. And they related it to famous people as well. And at the low end of my personality type was Robert Downey Jr., when he was really Robert Downey Jr., you know? And at the top end was the Dalai Lama.
All right.
And I'm looking at this and I'm going, and I'm reading it, because as I'm reading this profile and reading this story, I'm saying, this is my life story. This is my behaviours. These are my actions. And, you know, yes, I did act like Robert Downey Jr. at some stage, and I had some experiences towards the Dalai Lama end, but I want more of that.
Yeah.
And it gave me an idea that it was okay that I was this type of personality, but I could perform at a low level and I could perform at a high level. And it gave you some reasons and some interpretation of why that is, giving into fear, giving it into, you know, optimism, people pleasing and so forth, rather than staying with your truth, staying calm, working through situations and being kind. And it translated, as I was reading it, to how my life had played out.
Well, there you go. The library.
The library.
Get down there.
It's my favourite place.
Did you end up buying that book?
I end up buying that book and a number of other versions of it,
Yes.
and have gone into it and go back to it and refer to it.
Is the author still alive?
Yeah, the authors are psychologists based out of America, and there's a whole gamut of people that have sort of offshooted from that,
Or offshot?
offshooted, offshot from that teaching and that protocol. And so it's quite.
Have you been in
it's quite
contact
different.
with them?
No, I haven't. That'll be on the list. I'll have to
You
interview them.
should.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think just from how you described that they would love to hear that story, because that's true resonance and true determination. You know, I can see you going to the library. In fact, I was speaking to my Auntie Betty the other day. I was visiting her in Seymour, and she's 83, and she gets books from the library. And she's also on the internet as well and Googling and stuff. I said, isn't it funny, you know, we still have libraries around because people do want to go and they want to touch and they want to explore. And so, yeah, the Box Hill Library, it's $2 down here off it's probably about 24 Bank Street entrance. Get in there, borrow a book. I can't because I have too many fines dating back to when my children were at school.
You can go in there and just read them and put them back on the shelf.
Oh, really? But they might recognise me as well. There's that girl. She owes us $50.
Ray, look, the libraries and the wisdom of others is something that I'll always turn to. And through asking, just keep asking questions. Just keep asking questions and trying to find out the reasons why something is the way it is. And that's where I talked about it's an individual journey. You have to explore your own path and find your way. But I certainly had a lot of help along the way.
Yeah, well, look, I'm also curious. So you've decided that something needs to be done and that change is about to happen. You can feel it, you can sense it. How long before that decision in the granny flat to when things started really starting to feel like you were getting some traction?
It took probably about 6 to 9 months for me psychologically
Was
to
that
start.
like up and down?
It was progressively up, which was good. I was exploring a lot, facing up to a lot. There was still a lot of stuff sorting out with the divorce and the separation and everything. So I was going through that. But the thing that I did was cut out a lot of stuff, like food-wise, people-wise, emotion-wise, in terms of, and tried to be aware, stay aware and present in my journey along the way. So
were you working at the time?
Yeah, I was working. Yes, I was working. So I'd taken on a full-time job in Melbourne, and so that was good because it was a fresh start. It was a fresh company. It was a new start. One of the benefits of that is food-wise is and lifestyle-wise is that they were positioned an area where there wasn't many of the local food shops in and around, so I had to pack my own lunch. But also between the car park and the office was a gym.
Yes.
A company gym. And so that was sort of gave me the impetus to say, well, you've got to walk past it. Just go in. And at the time and the size, I really couldn't exercise that much. I just didn't have the energy to do it. And so it took me about 6 to 9 months to I lost about 10 kilos in weight and started feeling a bit better. And then I started, and that was mainly just from exercise and eating better. And then I started to find out, well, why had I struggled with weight for so long, and how can I solve this problem? And so another piece of wisdom I came across
from the library.
No, this one wasn't. This was actually, I heard an interview on radio, and I was driving along. His name was John Gabriel, and he was doing a book promotion, promoting his book called The Gabriel Method. And he's an American guy. He was 400 pounds. He lost about 200 pounds and wrote a book about it. But in his book, he talked about nourishing your body. And that was the message I got from it. The message was that if you nourish your body will respond. And so I started then on the journey of learning how to nourish my body. And that's when I started to get some help. And I was very fortunate that I had a very good friend who just happened to be an elite athlete, a physique bodybuilder. And I'd seen him, eating the way he eats and talking about his protocols and so forth. And I just dared to ask him the question, and I said, Luke, that stuff that you do with this food stuff that you always talk about, do you think that could help me? And I was still big. I was like, we're talking about, physique athlete. And he goes, he's such a humble and wonderful guy. He goes, it won't hurt. I go, it won't hurt. No, I don't want it not hurt. I want it to help. I want it to save me, save me. That's what I was saying internally. But
yes. And
so he introduced me to some nutrition plans, some eating plans. And over the next 12 weeks, and I asked him, I said, look, I'll follow it, but will you help me and guide me through the way? So I recruited him as a coach. He didn't realise he was coaching me.
So you didn't have to pay him then?
Didn't have to pay him. And in the next 12 weeks, I lost another 25 kilos, dropped 5 sizes of clothes, dropped 20 centimetres around my waist, and my work life totally changed. That's when I became a transformed man.
Are you still friends with Luke?
Luke is Luke, and I say Luke Matthias, so he knows who he is. And everyone else knows who he is just a wonderful human being. And we're still very good friends.
Is he here in Melbourne?
He's here in Melbourne,
Might have to get him on the show one day.
Yes, yeah. He's an entrepreneur, runs a wonderful business, helping people, fulfill their dreams, and that through business finance and
wow.
such things. But
because that is another area where, especially men who quite often are the Providers? Finance?
Oh, finance. Finance,
Yeah.
and that was a big issue that I got into, and it's still clearing up some of those
Yes.
things. But that was a big thing because, I was chasing the success dream and so forth, and just fell into the easy form of just put on the credit card and work again, thinking that it'll be all right in 2 years' time or, a month later.
Yes.
And the cycle just is endless, and it really, really is traumatic, and that sort of started the decay.
Yeah, it's a big one, isn't it? I think credit cards are kind of similar to gambling, aren't they? It's sort of there, and I'll pay that off next month, or no, I'll do that next year.
Well, it's same with the food. Oh, no, I'll have the donut now, and I'll work it off tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah, it just doesn't work.
What sort of thing in your mind when, you're so used to that cycle, you spent most of your life in that cycle. How do you either break it, replace it, or readdress it?
It is. And when I look at it, you have to do it gradually. You have to pick one thing at a time and focus on that, because some things need like a really good focused amount of time to work through. And just gradually build on it day by day. Like for me, changing my nutrition and getting over my cravings for sugar and all the wondrous foods I used to eat, it was a day-to-day thing. Even now I still have cravings for food. We shop at the Vic Market and we buy all organic, and we go there every week, and as I get out of the car, the waft of the donut van that I used to, because I used to work in the market, so I used to grow up eating,
Yes.
A dozen at a time. The waft still triggers my saliva. And I just look at the van and I go, really? It's been like 5 years? Really?
So what do you say to yourself when that's happening?
I've really conditioned myself to say that was a good experience, but that doesn't contribute to nourishing my body anymore. What that was doing, what that food does, is that fills a void of anxiety. So why am I feeling, if I'm eating that, why am I doing it? I'm feeling a void of anxiety. And so I look at food now and I say, how is this going to nourish my body? And it's not like I'm strict.
Can I just go back to that?
Yeah.
You mentioned anxiety and how you filled that void with, say, donuts, for example. How do you manage your anxiety now?
I do a couple of things. I do a lot of meditation. And
is that eyes shut, knees crossed kind of meditation? Or?
A combination of that and but also just walking meditation. Like I'll just go off and walk, or some of the most profound meditations I've had is just sitting in a park looking at a tree and just losing myself in the tree. So meditation can come in different forms. But part of my daily routine is I tick off my list, have I meditated today? And so that really helps me just clear everything out, clear the mind and calm the mind. The other things are stepping through fears. So being aware of when anxiety is rising and not shutting it off. So being aware, saying, okay, this is a really anxious moment. Okay, I'm really anxious, and just breathe. Okay, because it's not going to be too bad. It could be bad, but you'll survive.
Yes.
And it may not step through it straight away, but addressing what is causing that anxiety. So awareness of the anxiety, and then addressing what is the cause of that anxiety. And depending on the scale of it, it might not be straight away. It may be something where you have to, go and settle a debt, or you have to go and, say no to somebody, or you have to go and address an issue that's with somebody, which can take some time to process in your brain, but not shutting it off.
Yes, and having it lurking there in the background, which just adds to the other 10 that are
it
lurking
just builds
there
a
as well.
void. It just builds a bigger void.
Yeah.
If you try and push it down and shut it off, it just builds a bigger void. So so awareness of anxiety and awareness of emotions, and that comes a lot through just sitting in meditation and
Yes.
thinking and pondering and
in a
contemplating.
world where we completely embrace all of men's wonderful emotions, that was sarcasm. I was using there. Speaking of wonderful men, we're going to go to a break, but when we come back, we're hooking up with Dan Lewin. Now, Dan also works in this space, and he's a very accomplished dietitian and founder of the Men's Health Dietitian. He's been on the show before. He's amazing. I love what Dan has to talk about, and it's so great to see men working in this space. I know that you all don't agree on everything that's happening, but the contribution is amazing in terms of it helping other men. So he's going to give his 27 cents worth, I was going to say, on this critical issue. You're here with Rae Bonney, where it really is okay to not be okay, and I'm here with Sean. Now, Sean, your name, you've got two. You've got an O'Leary banged in there for good measure. What does that mean?
So O'Leary is my surname.
Yep.
Sean Nicholas is my first two names.
Oh, right.
And
okay.
my mum calls me Sean Nicholas.
Okay. So you're getting a bit rock star there.
Yeah, so it just works for me in terms of the new me.
The new you. So you're not only dropping a few kgs, but you're dropping a name as well.
Exactly.
Waiting on the line to weigh in, pardon the pun, on this largely ignored and alarmingly critical topic is dietitian and men's body image crusader Dan Lewin, all the way from the Gold Coast. Good afternoon, Dan.
Good afternoon, Ray. Sean, how are you?
Oh, Sean's
Oh, he's not in yet.
He actually is, but his headphones aren't quite working yet, so we're going to do a bit of a... Oh, he's on. There you go.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, Sean, how are you?
Oh, I'm very good and great to be speaking with you.
Likewise. Thanks, both of you, for inviting me along to the conversation this afternoon.
Great. Well, Dan, I'm going to encourage you to speak as loudly into your receiver and directly as possible so we get the best possible sound. Now, you're at the Gold Coast, aren't you?
Sunny Coast.
The sunny... Oh, that's right. I get confused. One's gold and one has sun. My daughter is actually up there doing all the worlds at the moment up at the Gold Coast, so she tells me the weather's beautiful.
It is, yeah. Beautiful day today.
Now, have you been tuned into the show?
I sure have been.
So what are your thoughts so far, given you've been on the show and you share some of this same space?
Yeah, oh wow. So you take it in so many directions in such a short period of time, which is great that you cover, so much. And Sean, certainly, thanks for sharing your story. I definitely want to, acknowledge that we all have our story, and good on you for getting out there. I love that, you dropped the V-bomb, the vulnerability. And it's so interesting what you said, about it's not about transforming yourself into someone else. It's really about transforming yourself, into an authentic version of yourself. And the only way you can be authentic is to actually be vulnerable. Put yourself out there and have the courage to do that. So, that's awesome. And there's so many other little topics that we can talk about.
Thanks, Dan. The thing that I'd love to discuss with you is that for so long, and I've heard you speak and had a look at some of your stuff, but for so long, I didn't realise that I was as big as what I was. Like, I look back on photos and I can't believe that was me, because I remember where the photo was taken. I remember being there. I remember experiencing that, but I don't remember me being in that size body. Is that what a lot of guys struggle with their body image? Is just that unawareness of what they're actually living in or seeing?
This is a really great question. I'm so glad you actually put it that way, because our physical appearance actually has nothing to do with our body image. So you're talking about two different things. So, from the physical appearance point of view, when you say, the guy's not realised they're that big, well, there's actually two sides of the coin. Maybe a guy isn't a bigger body and he doesn't realise he's that big, but now we've also got the challenge, in the culture that we live in, where there are guys, particularly, maybe muscular guys, who are big, but they think they're small.
Yeah.
Right? So you've actually got both sides of the coin, and it's not just, am I, fat, and I use that in a weight-neutral term. There's also, well, am I muscly enough now as well? And that's just where we are in the culture. But our body image actually has nothing to do with the reality of how we look. So our body image is actually quite complex and encompasses our perceptions, our thoughts, beliefs and attitudes around our body. So I think that's become a really confused issue at the moment where, people are trying to address their body image, but they're trying to do that by changing their body. But that's not addressing any of the emotional or psychological side of what the actual body image is.
Yeah, definitely. So what you're saying is that when you're standing in front of the mirror, it's the thoughts that are going through your head, not actually what you're seeing. It's how you're feeling about what's there. It's how you're feeling about...
It's how you're feeling. It's how you're perceiving your body. I mean, everyone looks in, for those people who can look in a mirror, because there are people who actually try not to look in a mirror, that they're struggling so much with their body image. But that's right, it's just our perception of how we look. So, a guy might look in the mirror and you might not have thought that you looked as big as you actually physically were. Whereas another guy might look in the mirror and he might think that he's small, but in reality, he's actually, he might be muscular.
Yeah.
So it is all about the perception that we have around our body. Then we face the issue of why is there so much emphasis on a man's body these days?
Well, that was my question. I'm just going to chime in here for a moment, if I may. And when you're talking about, these different perceptions, and I know men who are extremely fit and muscular but feel puny and insignificant, and then vice versa. So what's happening there, do you think?
I really think that, there's just been this, certainly in the last 30 years, there's been a real shift to a focus on, the male body image. And certainly one that's unrealistic because it's only portrayed as one type, that muscular, athletic physique.
Are you talking through our media and...
Yeah, certainly, media, social media.
Superhero
even
movies.
In magazines, advertising, the man's body has changed over the years that we see. Even if you look at all those health and fitness magazines, it is all focused on, essentially getting ripped, for lack of other technical term. All those supplements are geared around, fat loss and gaining muscle. That's all we're hearing. It's only one message. And I really think a big part of it is that muscularity is being associated with masculinity. But the fact is, they've got nothing to do with each other. I read a fascinating book recently called The Adonis Complex, and they theorize that, as women have become more empowered and, their ascendancy into, in air quotes, the man's world, a man is feeling like he needs to distinguish himself as a man. But, now there's women CEOs, and so there should be. But now they're on even keel, with men, so to speak. So what can a man do? And really, muscularity is one of those really few ways, men are always going to be a lot bigger, muscular physique-wise than women. And that's how they're trying to distinguish that masculinity. But it really, that the level of... muscular physique that a man has nothing to do with being a good man.
No, absolutely not. And when you're talking about this muscularity and masculinity, I think that women are becoming more and more involved in that being ripped state as well. Yeah. And I think, as I said earlier, I'm involved in F45 at the moment, about to embark on the 8-week challenge for my own personal reasons, not buying into what I want to look like anyone else, but the focus is definitely on building muscle, reducing fat.
Yeah, definitely.
And
gender aside, it's the look, and we really need to ask ourselves, for those who are going for that look, what are we willing to give up to attain that? What unhealthy behaviours do we have to adopt to actually achieve that look? And I don't think a lot of people realise there's a lot of compromise.
But I think it goes back to what you were saying, Dan, about, it's what your perception is, not what the feeling is. So me going into this is because I'm not feeling as good as I know I should. So some of my joints are starting to hurt, my back's starting to hurt. You know, various things are happening with me at my age that I'm going, I need to do something about it. And the best thing I can do is get fit, because I know from experience that works for me.
Yeah.
Not that I want to look like something.
That's right. And we need to, I think, extract that a little bit. Getting fit and your body size are not associated. No. So, you know, you've gone to F45 to get fit, not necessarily to get ripped.
No.
But I think, you know, we just live in that culture where that association exists for a lot of people. That's the message we're sold, that you need to look a particular way to be healthy.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Dan, that you mentioned, that the fitness, and I mentioned it to Rae earlier, is the exercise for me came at the end. And I exercise now for health, not to lose weight. I've been exercising all my life, and for 28 years didn't lose weight, just was up and down like a yo-yo.
Yeah.
And so the steps for me were to sort out my internal, emotional and mental framework, agility, or do that sort of fitness. So my mind fitness. Then I worked into the food. So I stepped into food fitness, and then the last part of it was the exercise or the body fitness. And without the mind fitness, without clearing that space in the mind and getting that mindset right, the transformation that I went through wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, there's so much, you know, psychology and so many emotional aspects to what you've been talking about today, Sean. It's not just I'm going to do it. You do the word that you use, that space. You know, we do need to create that space for that change to happen. There's something that you mentioned, that if I can just quickly swing to that, you know, you mentioned about nourishing, your body. And just a point that I want to make is that, you know, some people will say they're nourishing their body, they're, you know, going on a lifestyle change and, you know, cutting out foods, etc., etc. But that still comes from a place of deprivation and even shame, you know, because they're doing it because of body image dissatisfaction, you know, whereas you can nourish your body without the expectation of weight loss.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think again, that's where, there's so much contradictory messages, I guess, you could say, yeah.
I think, sorry to interrupt you there, Sean, but just quickly, the deprivation thing, especially for women, is skip meals, which has such an outrageously detrimental impact on your body if you want to lose weight. You know, it's such a fallacy, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. You know, skipping meals or fasting is a form of disordered eating, and it's, you know, usually done in the vein of, you know, trying to lose weight. But we know that with deprivation or restriction, whether it's physical or emotional, around food, the end result is going to be, you know, binging or overeating.
Well, you're an expert in that field, because you lived like that for a long time, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you know, it is a natural human reaction. That's just our, you know, biology. Is that, you know, when we're restricting food and not nourishing our body, you know, because nourishing our body includes giving it enough energy. If we don't do that, then at some point, you know, the opposite will happen. You know, the opposite of that action of restricting, and that is the binge or overeat.
Yeah, definitely. And the body, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, the body will go into a stress state, release hormones like cortisol and others that will actually store the food that you are eating as fat and other things that. So you're having a detrimental effect by creating all this mental and physical and emotional stress.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just the food binge. There's so much underlying it as well. You know, and certainly when it comes to health, it's not just the food we eat. You know, you mentioned it yourself. You know, spiritual, you know, emotional, etc., and certainly that applies with food as well. You know, we know that dieting is actually the greatest predictor of weight gain.
Yeah, definitely.
No one is ever told that in the media. But that's very clear in, the science journals. That's what the evidence demonstrates. So it was really interesting. I was listening in at the start, Sean, and you said, you're looking at the before and after photos and you're amazed that you were that size. You've been dieting from the age of 15 and you weren't sure how you got that big. And in part, some of the answer is in there, is the dieting. And certainly, I think it was Rae that said, using food as fortune and, having large portions and stuff like that contributes. But, the restriction, also certainly encourages that too.
Yeah, definitely. I've experienced that myself, and the restriction and cutting back or cutting out, massive amounts of food, especially, calorie deficit stuff, just doesn't work. And that's where I mentioned to Rae, actually putting the right nutrition in, the right amounts, just the right amount of energy for the activities that I was participating in, and good quality food made all the difference.
Mm. Yeah, and I think there's a couple of points there is, when it comes to the right amount, people are prescribing to diets, but the fact is that no one but you knows, how much food you need to eat to nourish your body. And so most people have just become so disconnected with their bodies because they're prescribing to these, fad diets, and they've lost total body trust. So a lot of people have to learn to reconnect with their body, with their own physical function of hunger and fullness, because dieting essentially gets rid of that. You just lose touch with your natural eating rhythm.
Oh, I like that you use body trust as well, because, you can just see your body turning around and saying, I absolutely have no faith in you looking after me at all.
Yeah.
And I also love the word nourishing as well, because it suggests that nourishing might equal flourishing, and nourishment is more sustainable than punishment as well. And you can write that down as a poem if you like, because it all rhymes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and with nourishment, I think what's really important, certainly for me in the space that I work in, is to help people understand that you don't have to eat perfectly to be healthy. So you can nourish yourself with good food, but if you're so rigid around the food you eat, but you lose enjoyment from food and you become socially isolated and you stop going out and eating food with your friends because of your food rules, well, that's actually no longer healthy. So nourishing your body is not just about the food you put in, but also psychologically is, eating a wide variety of foods and giving yourself that unconditional permission to eat all foods, and acknowledging that no single food, will make you sick, unless you have a medical condition. That's certainly a bit different, take a celiac. But, for the general population, all foods can have a place in the diet.
Mm.
Yeah, I like that. And Dan, do you find that with people that you work with, the hardest thing for them to work with is that trust in their body, their trust that they'll be okay eating normally? Yeah,
two things. I think that's certainly one of them, Sean, no doubt, because, diet culture, this $60 billion industry sells us the message. It tells us that we can't trust our body. So here I am trying to say, well, actually you can, and I always relate it to, if you think back to when you were, an infant or a toddler, you knew exactly, how much you needed to eat, when, and stuff like that. But as we have gotten older and received messages, whether it's from family or, media or whatever, we've lost that trust. And I think the second thing, Sean, is in terms of difficulties, the first hurdle is actually rejecting that diet mentality, rejecting that diet culture, and getting your autonomy back.
It's almost like a safety net, isn't it, Dan, for so many people? Sean, that, if just jump and the safety net will appear, you don't have to actually have it there to begin with.
Yeah, and I think that when you talked about that, the diet culture and people defaulting to tell me what to do, that's a wider societal thing as well. Just give me the solution, give me the magic, give me the magic pill.
Silver platter is what I say.
Yeah.
give me the answer on a silver
The
platter.
silver
Yeah.
platter. But how much do you think, guys, convenience builds into people falling off the tightrope?
Can I just weigh in on that? I actually flipped that around, and what I did, yes, convenience in terms of falling off the tightrope can work, but you can also use that to your advantage. So what I did is I changed my environment to make it convenient for me to lose the weight. So what I did is I surrounded my environment with, there was only good food in the house. So it was more convenient to eat the good food than to go through the drive-through.
Do you think it's more expensive?
No. We've sort of, my partner and I have looked at it, and it's much cheaper and long-term more sustainable eating healthy than eating out and eating takeaway food.
What about you, Dan? What are your thoughts on that?
Do I think convenience contributes?
Yeah. I'll give you an example. Like, I travel a lot, and I'm about to travel quite a bit for work now. And the F45 8-week challenge is a very, very strict diet. You know, it's when, how, what to eat. So it's more convenient, like, you know, you're at the airport to grab a sandwich. Like, there's not these foods available, and you can't sort of take them on the plane with you. So, you know, how much does this feed in?
Yeah, I think I really just want to dig a little bit deeper here and acknowledge that I think a lot of us have a real privilege in that, you know, we might have skills and knowledge about cooking and the tools to cook, but there's also a lot of people who don't. So, you know, I don't think writing off convenience foods is the right thing, you know, to do, because, you know, those fundamental life skills of, you know, planning your food, preparing it, and cooking it, not everyone has those. And so that's why turning to the convenience foods, at least an individual is actually still nourishing themselves. And yes, it can be certainly cheaper in the long term, you know, to make all your food at home and stuff like that. I just wanted to acknowledge that there are people who don't have that privilege of being able to do all of those things. And in terms of convenience foods, you know, it's one of those things where eating those kind of foods, is it unhealthy? I think it's about context. You know, if someone says to me, you know, I grab a meat pie, you know, 2 or 3 times a week, but then they also say I'm eating a wide variety of, you know, grains at other times, fruit and veggies, you know, protein, whatever, do those 2 or 3 meat pies really matter to their long-term health? The answer is no. So I think it's really about context, and there's been so much fear-mongering around convenience foods that I don't think that fear-mongering is actually healthy psychologically for many people. It's too black and white.
But I think if you look around, though, that our convenience food has become a lot more thoughtful, and, you know, there are a lot of options. You look at it's like sumo salad. That bar looks like that's got really, really good food.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I guess my question around convenience food is also, what are the positives for people? And I know that there's a lot of pre-prepared meal organisations that have amazing food that's really good. So you're right, there are people that hate cooking with a passion. And why would you want to do that to yourself every day if you didn't like it?
Yeah, and even, like, take single blokes. You know, I recently had a guy who just, on his own, and yes, you know, he made some meals that he could freeze, but he just didn't want to cook for one all the time.
Yeah.
You know, and so sometimes those kind of convenience foods, you know, you still have to have, I guess, the knowledge or education about making nourishing choices for yourself.
Yeah.
But, you know, they can certainly have a place. I don't think we should be writing them off completely.
No, definitely. As you said, you know, doing what's right for you. And that little point you had there about, you know, single people, preparing food on your own can really, really underscore loneliness, I think.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's not about food. That's about, you know, the feeling that you get when, you know, you're doing something joyous like preparing food. So that's just
and that's because I think we bond over food. You know, it creates real social connection. So if, you know, someone is single and they're doing it on their own, I guess in essence, they might be feeling left out.
Yeah. So bond with your convenience food provider. Bring them into your circle of support every day. Now, Dan, we're going to be going to a break now, but thank you so much for making time to come on the show and share your insights, your wisdom, and your expertise with us. It's so valuable.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, Ray. And Sean, thanks for allowing me to contribute to your segment today as well.
Really appreciate it. I lean on many experts, and it looks like you'll be one more of them, Dan.
No worries. I'm here to chat anytime.
Was there anything else that you wanted to add, Dan, before we let you go?
I guess just one other thing, just around food, it's just become such a confused space for a lot of people that, I see people, they turn up and they literally say, I just don't know how to eat anymore. And certainly around, a lot of people have forbidden foods. And I just wanted to say that, we're human beings, we don't have to earn the right to eat food, regardless of our body size. We need to eat to survive. And, if you are feeling like a particular food, to actually honour that hunger and that taste preference, because, when we don't, often that I guess, craving will just build up, and then that can result in the binge on that food. It's far healthier just to enjoy, the food that you feel like in the moment, and give yourself the care and consideration around that as well. Good thought,
Dan. All right, will you go off and... actually, before you go, I'm heading up to Brisbane, and we did talk about this. Roller skating is your new thing.
It sure is, yeah. I roller skated, when I was a kid. I started roller skating when I was 6, and I roller skated for about 10 years, and I did it, religiously every week. And, you get older, you kind of stop doing these things. And about 6 months ago, just really got over the jam, and just started looking for ways to reintroduce joyful movement into my world. And the way I did that was basically ask myself, well, what did I enjoy doing as a kid that had nothing to do with trying to control, my body and how it looked, and what did I enjoy? I was like, roller skating. And so I actually had my old speed skates, 25 years old.
Get a bit of DW40 into those, I bet.
Yeah, and just cranked it. And yeah, I've been roller skating every couple of weeks, for the last 6 months. And it's just great value. And, you request the song like Kokomo, and you get these real, head turns from the teenagers, and they're like, who's this? And
I sense a revival.
Yeah, bring it on. So,
well, I was saying to Dan, when I head up, we're going to try and have a date and go roller skating. I mean, not a date as in a romantic date, but we, you often catch up for business. You go and have a coffee or something, and we say, well, we should go roller skating. So we're going to try and do it.
Sounds awesome.
All right, Dan. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, Ray. Thanks, Sean. Have a good day.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye.
Cheers.
That was Dan Lewin. He is the men's dietitian and quite the expert when it comes to nutrition, not just about men, but about everyone. And also, you can see him on skates in Brisbane somewhere. It's pretty funny. It's great, though, isn't it, when you think about Dan's message, connecting with what you loved when you were a kid.
Yeah.
And this is what I got out of it, his chat today, but also the analogy of when you're an infant, you knew how much you needed.
You do.
And then all of a sudden we get seduced into all this other.
And you do lose that connection. And I'd love to have a conversation more in depth with Dan, is rebuilding that connection with your natural eating does take time.
Yep.
It does take time. And the food that we're surrounded with, the businesses that is food, that pushes certain foods on us, it does take us time to educate ourselves and re-educate our body on what's good for us.
Great. Well, that's a really good segue to go out with our next song, because when we come back, I want to talk to you about men that you might work with, and also some of the things that you're doing in our communities and societies to bring value from your experiences, but people that want to get healthy who actually appear to be quite thin, because there's the other side of it as well. It's what goes on internally, isn't it?
It is.
Fantastic. Now, I heard my daughter Rose talking to somebody the other day. She's now 23, but she was describing how her mum, that's me, would go to extreme measures in cheating whenever we played games. Because I never let my kids win at all. I was always playing to
Build
win.
resilience.
That's right. But yeah, especially Monopoly. Monopoly was my game where I took cheating to a whole new level.
Yeah.
And when you're playing against, 5, 6, 7-year-olds, it's not that hard, but they've clearly not forgotten it.
I love it. Similar experience. I have two boys and a daughter, but especially with the boys playing physically, you'd sort of let them win as young boys doing it, and then you get to a stage where they actually really beat you, and you go, "When did that happen?" and you go, "Wow," and you try your hardest, and you can't beat them.
So how old are they?
They're now 20, 18 and 17.
Oh, right. Are they tall as well?
You're not quite as tall as me, but reasonably tall, yeah. And they stay physically active and are on their journey.
Are they influenced at all by your journey?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. We talk about it quite often. I was talking with my son the other day. My sons and I actually catch up. When we catch up in the gym.
All right.
which is awesome, which is a great thing to do, is share that time, both personally but also in a physical environment with the kids. And my son was asking me, because we were talking about some of the photos, and he was asking me whether the photos when we were on holidays were the biggest I'd ever been. I said there's a few times where I'd maxed out. And yeah, in his mind, and it'll be a continual conversation, his mind, he goes, yeah, you were huge. But it's now I notice that we talk and that they're asking me questions about nutrition, what should I be eating, then which is awesome to be able to be that guiding light for them.
Because typically, that relationship doesn't happen with men and boys, and that's part of the work that I do, is raising awareness around, men being great parents, because they are great parents, and just having, it's not only the role of the mother to provide things like nutritional advice or, guidance. And I think it's really great that, that's been built as well. And I think we could see a lot more of that in our media, taking away, mums, get your kids' lunches ready, because it's still that. What about parents, get your kids' lunch ready? Exactly.
And I was talking to a researcher from Deakin recently about the influence dads have on children's eating habits. Even if they're not preparing or involved in the meal preparation and delivery, the children still role model their father's eating habits.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that's some of the research that they were doing to uncover that.
How does that work in that, again, typically men will spend more time at work, women more time at home preparing this stuff? Where would they get that role modelling from?
There's more research to be done on it, but I think it's just the observational and the appearance and the bonds between children and their fathers that often the children will just mimic it. I remember there was an advertising campaign around alcohol where it showed the father drinking, then the son drinking, and then the grandson drinking, and that habit and similar sort of method in place, where I think it's the children's observational stuff of the father that they look at and that they take on board.
Interesting. I'll take a closer look at that, but did go a bit off topic there. Well, not really off topic. It's on topic. But before we went to the break, I had that question around, we've been talking a lot about body image, and with I guess the inference that, big is not good, and that, perhaps that weight loss might be a great thing. But we're not looking at intrinsically what's going on inside. And quite often people that probably biologically and genetically aren't predisposed, can you say that
disposed?
Word? Yes. To weight gain can often be more unhealthy because you can't really see what's going on. The assumption is that you're fit if you're not fat.
Yeah, definitely. It and I think, as Dan said, it doesn't matter what your body shape or size is, you can still have health issues. And especially, there's many cases of people who appear to be thin or even a healthy size in common terms that have diabetes. Even athletes. even athletes that are diagnosed with diabetes, and even that they've been fit and healthy all their life, but their body's reacted to the way their lifestyle or their eating, or even what it's been put through, if they're a sports person, and their body reacts and says, I'm not going to work like that anymore.
Yes.
and so staying in tune with that internal health, and that's where I failed for many years, and I highly recommend. Me and my GP are now good friends.
Oh, really?
Well, we see each other
Yes.
quite often.
Mm.
So it's actually going to the GP and having those checkups. I did some work last year with the Sons of the West, which is a organisation or a program run by the Western Bulldogs for men's health, and they have a fantastic program for men, and it'll be starting up again this year. But part of that is go speak to your health professionals. Go actually get checked out what's happening. Get your blood test done, get your fitness checked, get a health check.
But and this again, I've done a little bit of work and discussion on this topic as well, where the solution so many times, especially for men, is go and see your GP. Now, for men who aren't feeling great, aren't travelling great, will go and see their GP, and once they do, they'll talk about their experience of not feeling happy, of not eating, maybe whatever the issues might be. They fill in the K10, and that equals depression, which equals medication, which equals not a great place to be. So I think what you're saying, Sean, is you have a relationship with your GP who knows you.
Yep.
And I think being careful about wanting the answer from your GP, first of all, getting in touch with yourself to find out what's going on for you, and being able to articulate that to your GP. And if you're not a person who's comfortable doing that, write a list, take somebody with you who can articulate on your behalf, because I think where the state of our health system at the moment, it's very transactional. So you go in and you transact it and you come out, and it's very difficult to build these really strong relationships. And that's not because GPs are bad. They actually have businesses to run now that aren't conducive to having longer sessions. So
yeah, definitely, and it is being again aware of the information you've been given, and getting second opinions, options. The thing that I really promote people to do is find somebody that's travelled the path that you're looking to travel, that you can assimilate with and resonate with, that's gone on a journey or has been in a situation, like Dan with binge eating and body image. He's had the experience, so he understands. So he's coming from a place of experience as well,
and empathy.
Yes. And so if you can find somebody or a community, and there's many ways to connect socially with communities and groups of people that you feel can share what you're experiencing.
Yes,
that can go a long way to helping you become more aware and start the journey of change.
And on that, we have a few connections. For Dan, for example, if anybody wanted to get in contact with Dan, look up the men's health dietitian, or Dan Lewin. That's Lewin. Check him out. He's got a lot of great information. But you, Sean, tell us a little bit about what you get up to in terms of the support that you're offering others.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I currently run or host a men's health podcast, and that came about from wanting to share what I'd learnt with others, and so I tap into coaches and experts and people who have transformed, and it's focused on men's health. It's called the Transformed Man Show, so people can tap into that and hear people talking and providing information. I also run or catch up with a group on a Sunday morning in around the Botanical Gardens, and we call it the 13-Minute Fitness Club, which is sort of a free thing that I turn up and host. And that came about because early on in my transformation journey, 13 minutes of exercise was all I could do.
All right. So you don't do 13 minutes of exercise?
Yeah, you do. We do. That's all we do. We do 13 minutes of exercise, and we sit down and have for the next 45 minutes, have a coffee and talk about men's health stuff.
Fantastic.
So for me, when I started changing and transforming, I was prescribed to do 20 minutes of exercise 3 times a week to start with. I couldn't get my head around it.
Wow.
And I found this little program app on my phone that had a 13-minute workout, and I put in 4 minutes of warm up and 3 minutes of cool down, and they got me the 20 minutes. And sometimes it took me 20 minutes to get out of bed to do my 13-minute workout.
Yeah.
You know, psychologically working through getting out of bed to do a 13-minute workout.
But that's good enough, isn't it?
Yeah, 13 minutes, and that's it. I said, if just start with doing 13 minutes, and I justified it in my head. Okay, it's more than 10 minutes. It's a good effort. It's not quite 15, so it's achievable.
Yes.
And that's how 13 minutes came up. And so we do that every Sunday.
That's fantastic. And it's near the shrine, isn't it?
Yeah, near the shrine. And
Yes.
we just do, sometimes it's pretty physical. Sometimes it's some stretching and yoga, and then we catch up. And you can connect with me via Facebook or via my website
Which
to
I'll
find out about that.
put the links. Oh, well, we've already got some links to it anyway on my
Yeah.
Facebook page. But also you do workshops too.
Yeah, and so when we talked earlier about the psychological side of it, developing the personal internal side of it, I then started exploring that because I really wanted to help these guys break through. I really wanted to help them break through. And so I went back and I actually examined what I did, and that's when I realized that I went through the psychological journey first. So I've put together the information that I've learned into a framework and some really good tools where people can, and it's not just around weight loss. This is more about, personal development. And so I call it breakthrough with purpose, and it's about aligning, getting understanding of who you are and how you operate, but then aligning yourself with your values, your intent and aspirations, but also your purpose, why you want to do what you do. Because purpose gives meaning to your actions. And my purpose now is different from what it was 5 years ago. My purpose 5 years ago was to survive 10 years. My purpose now is to create a world where every man has good health and good fitness. And so understanding that, and when I verbalize that fills me with energy, and that fills me with energy to go about what I do. And so I've put those tools together in this workshop environment, and it's very interactive to help people take those early steps.
So how do people interact with a workshop like that, given that, people are working, you're one person delivering this to the world, so therefore there's a time and logistical issue there?
At the moment, the time and logistical thing is you have to turn up in the room.
Yes.
when I host them. There's one coming up in February, on February the 10th. And
It's my son's birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, George. He'll be
Happy
20.
birthday, George.
Yeah.
And so I'll be hosting them regularly to start off with around Melbourne, and then if I can, because it's an interactive thing, it's personal. Doing it on an online environment, it will be a challenge for me to take it. But if I can, that'll be it. That'll be the way to do it. But this is the start of building,
Yes.
and building that purpose and manifesting that purpose.
Well, if anyone's listening or knows somebody who might benefit from coming along to one of these workshops, hop on your Googles, Google The Transformed Man.
Yep.
And you'll find Sean's website. And on there, I know there's 2 tabs. There's one to interact around the 13-minute exercise at the Shrine of Remembrance every Sunday at
7 a.m.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, 7 a.m.
7 a.m. before all the tourists and all the brunches get to the cafes.
Yes. Or check out the workshops
Yep.
as well. And, you never know even if you're a woman wanting to learn about how to manage your man or vice versa, there's something there for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm open for people to connect with me via social media and talk about it and discuss it. I'm really passionate about sharing what I've learned and even connecting others with people that have helped me along the journey.
Or that book.
Or the book, The Enneagram.
I'm going to put that up as well. You have to send me a link to that.
I'll send you a link to that. And yeah, so they can just connect with me via social media. Look up SeanNicholas.com or The Transformed Man, and I'm sure you'll find me.
Now that's Nicholas with it, Nicholas.
Yes.
No double L's in that one. But I like a bit of feedback. as well on the show, and we do get some fantastic comments. So thank you to everyone who does, and we have listeners all over the world. We've got some in LA, London, China, and I think somebody in Belgium as well that I know of. So thank you for tuning in. But if you want to give us some feedback, you can email me at rae.bonney@3wbc.org.au, or find me on Presenting Rae Bonney. That's on Facebook. Just join up there. I have a YouTube channel and a podcast now. So again, you just type in my name and you will find me at either of those. But for further discussion on the show, phone John Farmer, our station manager. He's waiting for your call right now on 039 285 4846. And if you want to get us directly in the studio, maybe during a song, our number is 9285 4847. There you go. Look, I'm waiting for the phone to ring. Nothing. I can see John running for the phone, though. Now, your podcast, that's got quite a bit of a take-up. And what kinds of people are you interviewing?
Yeah, the Transform Man Show. So I'm interviewing people. We've had people talking about men's sexual health. We've had an oncologist talking about men's health issues. Financial planner talking about financial fitness.
Great, yeah.
A coach of physical trainers or personal trainers talking about how to find a good personal trainer. I've had Tom Cronin of the Stillness Project talking about meditation. Craig Harper talking about making stuff happen for real.
Yes.
Which is
Not just
awesome.
talking about
Not
it
just talking
on a
about it.
podcast.
And I've gone back and listened to that, 4 or 5 times myself just to go through the information again. So yeah, a wide variety of people.
You recently had Warren Davies on as well.
Yes, Warren Davies. Yeah, his episode will be coming up in February. So we just recorded that just before Christmas, and that was quite.
Well, I think
Warren,
he's actually listening in today. So big hello to you, Warren.
Hey, Warren.
Now, Warren was the MC for our event, I'm Just a Man, that we talked about earlier in the show, and he did a fabulous job making us sound and look good up there on the stage. So. Hopefully he's going to come to Melbourne and come on this show.
Yeah,
well.
Excellent. Yeah, people like Warren and others I just find it's great just to connect with these people and like yourself, Rae, and just mobilise this consciousness around men's health and bring some truth to it and some reality and authenticity to it, which is what they do.
And I think understanding and permission as well. With men, men also matter, and men too, and men do experience the broad issues that women do, just in a male context, and so I think that it's okay.
It is okay, and the wonderful thing that I'm discovering is that men do like to talk. Men do like to share.
I do all bloody days talk to men.
Men do like to share in the right environment and in the right situation.
Correct.
And it's good for people to understand that if there's a man in your life, get him to open up.
Well, I'm gonna contest you on that.
Oh, yeah?
When you use words, get him to open up, it's about creating
the space for him to allow him to open up.
And opening up doesn't necessarily even mean talking. No. Just being in the space or being in the environment or creating that moment where, like you with the tree, just sitting with a tree where you can open up your own world in privacy. I think it's making those things possible for men and women and children, for anyone really, to say, we talk a lot about the difficult conversation, the hard conversation. That's why I pulled you up before on that. Like, what is a hard conversation? Yeah. If we say it enough, it'll feel hard. Whereas if we just say it's a conversation, when we're talking about things like suicide or depression or, things that might lead people to feeling vulnerable, vulnerability, as you pointed out before, is an awesome feeling.
It is.
But we don't pose it like that.
And stepping through that vulnerability, like the vulnerability brings up that sense of fear. It's a combination of a whole range of emotions, but stepping through it and embracing it, like on the other side, is joy and peace and happiness. It's
So better
fantastic.
understanding about yourself and knowing that, like this show, it's okay to not be okay, and celebrating that, celebrating your vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Or some of my vulnerabilities, I turn up at wrong places at wrong time because I get a little bit confused about things, and I love that about myself. It's a bit quirky and means I have to build in a whole repertoire of other things into my life to minimize risk. But learning to love those quirky, sharp edges or soft edges that we have, I think.
It is. And you're saying it's okay to be not okay resonates with me, understanding that we're all dysfunctional in some way.
Or is that functional?
And that's what I'm saying. And that's how we function.
Yes, because somebody told us that was dysfunctional. Whereas if you're functioning, then there's something functional going on. And, we were even talking before about we're in the helping space, and we are the experts, we are the professionals. However, people are coming to see us and paying for us to do these things for them. However, it's okay that at times we're not okay as well, in a very big way.
Yep.
But I think the expectation is that we're fine now. We used to not be fine, but now we are. Whereas I don't know what your experience is, but I manage so much better than I used to, but I manage the same things. I manage the same vulnerabilities, the same challenges, the same hurdles, just in a better way.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not as though anxiety and anxious situations have disappeared for me. This is life. Yeah. But the way I deal with them and the way I manage them and the issues or the struggles with food, they're still there. The struggles with relationships and people, they're still there. Yeah. But I just manage it and am more comfortable with managing it in a better way, or in a way that I feel comfortable with and I'm okay with.
Yeah, well, there's your message for the day, people. I'm off somewhere in Australia talking to people about...
Roller skating.
I might be roller skating with Dan. In fact, that's probably where I am going to be. But I'm very fortunate to go out and talk to people, organisations about creating environments that support mental health in the workplace. So that's going to be my job for the next couple of weeks. So I think I'm back somewhere near the end of February, so be good until then. But look, sometimes people that are listening into our show, sometimes they can experience feelings that are quite uncomfortable. So don't forget the crisis lines. We've got Lifeline, very good service, 131114. If you ring and you don't like the person you're talking to, hang up and try again. It's okay. It's okay. We always don't connect with people, so that's okay. The suicide callback service, another great service that we have here in Australia. That's 1300 659 467, and of course 000 if that's where you need to go. It's not a crime to dial 000 if you're really, really worried about somebody. So there you go. Been a great show.
Thank you, Rae. Thank you for having me. I really, really enjoyed it and privileged and honoured to be speaking here and sharing with your listeners.
Well, I'm sure they've enjoyed it as well. But for me, I feel very fortunate every week to have somebody like you come into the studio and actually make time as well, because it is a big chunk out of your working day. Did they give you a time off?
They may find out about it.
They may find out. They're gonna, it's supposed to be here.
No, it's all good. All good.
That's good. And anyone else listening in that you wanted to send a cheerio to?
Oh, just to all the guys out there and people that I know, jump on board, get behind Rae. If this is the first time you're listening to Rae, get behind her and her guests and what she's doing. You're doing great stuff. And
if you want to be a guest.
Yeah, if you want to be a guest.
If you've got something that you want to say and you're articulate, good looking, because it's very important on radio.
How did I get in?
Aesthetics. You're transformed, of course. Okay. That's right. Okay, well, without further ado, I'm going to say goodbye. And remember, it's okay to not be okay. And also basic kindness and care. You never, ever know what's going on in somebody's life. The iceberg, that tip, you see what's going on the tip. You've got no idea what's going on for somebody. So remember that. Okay, everyone. See ya.